Okay, briefly, firstly, this is a provision in the Book of the Covenant, in the text of the Will and Testament of Abdulbaha. At the end of the first section, it states that the Bahais are forbidden to engage in and interfere in the functioning of the government and the body politic in the material affairs of civilization in any way. This is reiterated by Bahaullah, or actually Abdulbaha's things, the commentary on what Bahaullah revealed, but reiterated by Bahaullah in the Kitabiyat, where he says that the government of the earth has been vouchsafed over to them, meaning the kings and leaders and public servants of the world. But he says the hearts belong to God. So our role in this, as Bahais under the covenant, is clearly and explicitly defined. We are not, as a Baha'i group, to interfere with state matters of state, that the governments of the earth have been given over to the rulers of the world. But our mission, our one crusade, is against the insistent self inside of ourselves. When we overcome this in ourselves, we can then share the divine guidance we receive by God to overcome nafs amara, the insistent self in ourself, and achieve nafs alahutiya. And if we're able to do this, and that's the highest thing, that you could also have nafs malakutiya or nafs kamila, is good enough, really. But anyhow, we overcome nafs amara, the assistant self, and when this happens to us, in the divine teachings of Tazkiyah that Baha'u'llah and Abdulbaha have revealed for the purification and growth of the soul, God, because God's our direct teacher, we now have skills and experiences in the spirit world of overcoming these things. So when we meet with somebody else, we can guide based on what works for us. Now, just because it works for us doesn't mean it's going to work for another person, but we can share this with them through consultation. And they might get a whiff of what this divine breeze is we're talking about, and then they have to figure out how to overcome nafs amara, the assistant self, on their own. Once people overcome this in themselves, they're given the divine gift of guidance of how to implement things in their own life. No matter how strongly worded a religious commandment is, or a directive, or if something's explicitly stated to be haram or halal, and people want to obey this, it still doesn't amount to anything more than a suggestion on the plane of the equality of the oneness of humanity. When Jesus says that they should do this, they're free to accept him and follow his guidance and reap the rewards and benefits, or they can crucify him, which they did, which means they're rejecting his message in the most vehement, obvious form of rejection by crucifying him so they don't have to listen to what he has to say anymore. He was only in his 30s. They wouldn't have crucified him. He might have lived to be 90. We'd have 60 more years of revelation of the New Testament. So they really deprived the world of a great gift of this beloved soul who lived at the time of Caesar's coming to power in the Roman Empire. Had he lived and they hadn't crucified him, when this whole scenario in Roman Empire adopting Christianity would have gone down or unfolded in a different way, and Rome wouldn't have split into Eastern and Western Christianity, the covenants wouldn't have been broken, and the Russian Orthodox wouldn't be at war with Pope Francis and Joe Biden, the Catholic. So we're seeing a war between Western Christianity and Eastern Christianity, similar to the disagreement between Sunni and Shiite. When the Ottoman Emperor Salim decided he'd had enough, this is when the House of Safavid came to power, around 1511, and the entire Islamic world almost became under the Safavid Shia influence. That's when Suleiman the Magnificent came forward and made sure that the Sunni world maintained its control over those territories that Salim had abandoned. So these tensions between Sunni and Shia, between Joe Biden, the Catholic Western Christians and the Pope, and Putin and Patriarch Kirill in Moscow of the Eastern Orthodox is at the root a religious dispute. If we were able to meet with these different ones and they wanted to see the truth of Christianity, and all we can do is remove the veils and show them the facts. And even if we say, and if you don't do this, God will punish you, it doesn't matter, you know, because God doesn't punish people directly anyway. They don't follow God, and they basically wind up getting the karma of their own deeds upon them, is how it works. So it's just a suggestion. Even if it's a commandment, it says thou shalt not. Well, I can still do it anyway. So, but if I do, I've been warned there'll be some sort of a consequence. And the consequence is something absolutely horrible. It's when the person realizes that they did something wrong and they can't live with themselves because they realize what they've done. That's the punishment. They can't get out of that condition of blaming themselves. Nafs lawama. So therefore, we have to overcome the insistent self. And if we're able to become the perfect self, nafs kamila, then we become a spiritual being, and we don't do things that wrong others, because in reality, we know if we do that, we'll be wrong on ourselves. So these texts, to stay out of politics, are absolutely explicit. So what is our role? Abdulbaha has a wonderful tablet called The Treatise of Government and Governance about how religious people are supposed to give religious guidance, but not tell the people how to implement it in their lives, or not command or direct or coerce or manipulate or use games and stunts and tactics to get the governments to do what the religious leaders think should be the right thing. In fact, he says most of the cause of all the wars is because the government leaders like Biden and Putin are listening to the religious leaders in how to implement politics, like Pope Francis and Patriarch Kirill. And these ones don't know how to implement right governance in society. People who are in government and are public servants know what to do. Bankers know what to do in finance. Business people know what to do in trade and commerce. Farmers know what to do in agriculture. Artists know what to do in art. Musicians, scientists. What we do is when the scientist, the artist, the musician, the individual truth seeker, a government leader wants to know what the divine guidance is, we tell them what we understand the divine guidance to be. For instance, we would say, oh, in the explicit holy text, this is ruled as halal, whereas this is ruled as haram. But circumstances alter cases. One of the things that's explicitly haram in the Octus of Bahaullah is the use of heroin and opium. It's forbidden. And twice he says this. A lot of the Sufis got messed up in this stuff, thinking they were being spiritual. So he outlawed it. So it's halal. So it's haram. But if a doctor needs to do a surgery on a person and they need to use anesthetic to ease the pain during the surgery, they might use opium, in which case it's not haram at all. It's actually explicitly necessary to do. So circumstances alter cases. And that's why religious people like myself and our other fellow Bahais that are religious and spiritual educators, according to the Risala Siya, I can't remember right now, the Treatise on Government, he says that they just give divine guidance and let the people implement it the way they're going to implement it. So this is the balance that the Baha'is need to have between the spiritual guidance that we give to other people and governments, and the non-interference and the non-manipulation and the non-coercion we give. For instance, a covenant or a contract in the United States is not legal if it's signed under duress. If somebody wants to steal somebody's house from them and they have all the legal paperwork for the house and they put a gun to their head and they're like, sign over the deed to your house, and they do it at gunpoint, and it comes out in court that they were forced to sign the document under duress, is what this means, then the covenant's null and void. So nobody can enter into a covenant with God if they've been scared into it by a Naf Samara minister yelling and screaming at them that they're going to burn in the fires of hell, and making them so emotionally distracted and concerned of their own spiritual fears and well-being that they can't use their intellect, and their reptilian brain takes over and their body chemistry changes and they can't think straight. It's a covenant under duress. So we can't give divine guidance except in a state and a condition of loving kindness and duraba, so that the people can be free to ascertain and agree the facts and see what the divine guidance is. And then they're absolutely free, even if it's a commandment, to figure out how to implement that in their own life. And this is explicitly described in the Kitab-i-Yad, the government of the earth's been given to them, in the Will and Testament on page 15, that we're forbidden to interfere with politics, a variety of other Baha'i writings that say we're forbidden to interfere in politics, and especially the guidance in the treatise on leadership about our right role in guiding people to end war and not using religious differences to foment war and disruption. Religious people should just give guidance, and it's up to the other people in their spheres of jurisdiction of how to implement that correctly. And our statesmen and world leaders will figure out how to implement these guidelines on their own by setting up a international tribunal, and war will no longer be, again, a viable means for settling human disputes nationally and internationally.